So sometimes we wore funny hats to say this scene we don't like. They don't like this one.
We just did this thing. That was when they were going to sue us for.
They walked in, said one line, and the studio cracked up. Lenny and Squiggy weren't just side characters. They were chaos wrapped in leather jackets, stealing every scene they touched. But behind the laughter was a story no one told. How did two unknown comics crash their way onto Laverne and Shirley? And why did Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall keep silent about what really happened on that set for so long? The truth involves house party auditions, last-minute rewrites, and behind-the-scenes moments too wild for television. This is the untold story of the duo who changed sitcom history forever. Origins in a living room before the cameras, before the catchphrases, before that unforgettable hello that shook the studio walls. Lenny and Squiggy were just two guys cracking jokes at a house party. Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall still laughed years later when they remembered that night. The whole thing started in Penny's living room. It wasn't an audition, not even close. It was a casual evening, friends dropping by for drinks, the kind of night Penny and her then-husband, Rob Reiner, were known for. They always had people over, actors, writers, comedians, and on that night, two guests stood out, David Lander and Michael McKean. Penny already knew them from A Credibility Gap, a sketch comedy and musical satire group that had built a cult following in the 70s. Their timing, wit, and knack for sharp improv made them the kind of performers you remembered instantly. But that night, something unexpected happened. As the group chatted and laughed, David and Michael suddenly shifted gears. They became Lenny and Squiggy right there in the living room. They didn't need encouragement, Penny later said, grinning at the memory. They just went into it. 1 second, they were themselves. Next, they were two bizarre, lovable goofs with exaggerated accents, nervous tics, and a chemistry that was impossible to fake. Everyone in the room broke down laughing. The transformation was seamless, spontaneous, and totally unforgettable. Cindy recalled that the characters had an energy that filled the space. They had this rhythm, she said. They'd bounce off each other like they'd been doing it forever. It wasn't just funny, it was electric. Penny saw it too. She didn't need a script to know it worked. What she saw that night was pure comedic instinct. The way they moved, the way they interrupted each other, the way one pause could make an audience erupt. The timing couldn't have been better. Laverne and Shirley was just getting its voice, a lively sitcom about two best friends of the same social class struggling to live independently. The show relied on Penny and Cindy's chemistry, but Garry Marshall, Penny's brother and the producer, sought something more. The characters who could barge in, stir, and leave the viewers breathless. Thus, Penny proposed, you have to check these two men out. The following day, David and Michael found themselves being called to the set. No proper tryouts, no tedious screening, only a possibility to reveal what they were capable of. And when they entered that soundstage, it was a case of déjà vu. They did not merely act, they dominated the space, just like they had in Penny's living room. Everyone was laughing without a pause. They were bizarre, exaggerated, yet utterly authentic in their madness. It was like catching lightning in a bottle, Cindy remarked. They always came, got their laughs, and left. That was the case every time. The living room act, which was an improvised one at first, became a legend in TV history. However, it was not mere chance, it was the combination of instinct and opportunity. Penny had a long list of artists who made her laugh, but very few had the power to bring the whole audience down in the blink of an eye. The same was true with David and Michael. They had the same wonderful and rare gift. They did not pretend to be funny. They were indeed funny, starting with their posture and ending with how they pronounced their words. Later, Penny would say they were meant to come into a place, deliver a line, and leave as if the place was theirs. That was precisely what Lenny and Squiggy turned into, a dazzling comic storm that could burst into a scene, crack up the audience, and be gone before you could take a breath. And it all started not in a casting call or a writer's room, but in a crowded Los Angeles living room, where two friends slipped into character and changed sitcom history forever. From Anthony to Squiggy, when Laverne and Shirley was still new and finding its rhythm, nobody could have guessed that two side characters, originally known as Lenny and Anthony, would become television icons. The plan was simple. Bring in two neighborhood guys who were even more awkward, broke, and over the top than Laverne and Shirley. The chemistry was there, the laughs were instant, and audiences couldn't get enough of them. But before the world met Lenny and Squiggy, a behind-the-scenes decision changed everything about who they were supposed to be. According to Penny Marshall, the first version of the characters wasn't supposed to include Squiggy at all. The character's name was Anthony, an Italian guy from the neighborhood, paired with Lenny in what was meant to be a one-off appearance. It was Lenny and Anthony, Penny explained, but there were too many Italians already. She wasn't exaggerating. Between Phil Foster's Frank DeFazio, Eddie Mecca's Carmine Ragusa, and the entire Italian flavor that already ran through the show, the producers decided they needed something different. So they changed everything. Anthony was out, and Andrew Squiggy Squigman was born. Same comedy duo, new identity. And with that change, the entire balance of Laverne and Shirley shifted. Squiggy wasn't Italian anymore. He was vaguely German, or maybe Eastern European, depending on the day. What mattered wasn't the nationality, it was the sound. The name, Squiggy, popped. It was strange, snappy, and just cartoonish enough to stick in your head. It fit perfectly next to Lenny's simpler, everyman tone. That transformation wasn't just cosmetic. The rewrite freed the duo to be bigger, broader, and far more unpredictable. Their weirdness wasn't tied to ethnicity or location, it was just who they were. They became the living embodiment of lovable chaos. And the audience could feel it. Penny recalled that the name change was only the start. Once they became Lenny and Squiggy, everything clicked. The accents, the posture, the strange speech rhythms, all of it just worked. They had their own world, she said. They'd come in, talk nonsense, make everyone laugh, and leave like they had somewhere else to destroy. Obviously, Lenny was also affected by the creative shuffle. Lenny Kosnowski was his full name, and it was meant to sound comical even before he spoke a single word. Penny Marshall made a joke once that Kosnowski meant help, there's a hog in my kitchen, a line that wonderfully characterized the ridiculous and lovable aura that the pair had all the time around them. Their very names were fashioned for laughter, a long, heavy syllable coupled with a short, sharp joke. Cindy Williams considered the change a blessing. Then they were Lenny and Squiggy. It just made sense, she declared. The moment they entered the set, the audience had already realized they were going to face trouble. The names just made you laugh before the characters even had the chance to utter a word. The same in the background, the shift offered writers more liberty, as well. The characters could now hover between the different stories, neighbors, workmates, support characters, or disrupting the total flow. The pair was not asked for a reason to come. They could simply pop in, deliver a well-placed joke, and disappear like ghosts in blue. Garry Marshall, who was famous for his stringent timing and structure, also recognized the brilliance in it. They enter, get the laugh, and leave, he remarked. That's money. And that was the extraordinary thing. Among the array of hard-working and struggling characters, Lenny and Squiggy were the comic release valves, the odd friends that everyone put up with because they lightened the atmosphere a little. They were neither intended to be profound nor polished. They were simply to be hilarious, pure, and simple. The moment their pilot episodes were broadcast, the audience viewers were already hooked. Anthony was erased from the memory. Squiggy became synonymous with every household. It was strange, it was daring and memorable. What initially was a trivial casting error metamorphosed into one of the most intelligent artistic shifts in the history of sitcoms. Because once Lenny and Squiggy walked through that door saying hello in that unmistakable voice, nobody cared what their names used to be. Gary's ladder, comedy math. When Penny Marshall first brought David Lander and Michael McKean to Garry Marshall, she knew they were funny, but Garry saw something deeper. He didn't just see two goofballs with sharp timing. He saw the missing rung in his comedy ladder. To Garry, every great sitcom worked like a social equation. You needed contrast. Characters higher up the ladder, striving for something better, and characters below them, reminding everyone that it could always be worse. That was Gary's comedy math, and no one calculated it better. He looked at Laverne and Shirley and saw two working-class women trying to climb out of Milwaukee's brewery life. They were dreamers and strugglers, already funny and relatable. But even lovable underdogs needed someone to look down on, someone louder, funnier, and far less put together. That's where Lenny and Squiggy came in. As Garry put it, someone's got to be worse than you. It wasn't an insult, it was architecture. Every straight man needed a wild card. For every heartfelt scene, there had to be chaos waiting off stage. Laverne and Shirley were the emotional center, but Lenny and Squiggy were the pressure valves, bursting in at just the right moment to blow the tension sky high. And Garry knew that to break the rules, they had to do it perfectly. That's why Lenny and Squiggy's appearances were short, sharp, and explosive. They were the comedic shockwave, the guys who'd barge into an argument, drop one absurd line, and make the audience forget they just watched a scene about heartbreak or money troubles. Their entire function was to keep the rhythm alive. Cindy Williams once remarked, Garry was like a mathematician when it came to laughs. He knew where to place the joke, how long to let it land, and when to get out before it was stale. With Lenny and Squiggy, that timing was perfect. The people watching the show were well aware that every time the door opened to let in those two, they would definitely not miss the laughter. It was a very rare expectation comedy trick that few shows could perform. Nevertheless, Garry's formula was not just about the right timing, it was about the right mix. Laverne and Shirley were not sparkling. They had their faults and were very much like real people. Therefore, the characters under them had to have great enough stories to not be merely sad or pitiful, but to be so ludicrous that the girls, by comparison, would look heroic. Lenny and Squiggy were just the guys for that. Their craziness counterbalanced Laverne and Shirley's disorder, almost making it look like they were so organized. The balance that was achieved gave the show its unique character. Laverne and Shirley were different and special as they mixed female leads with pure slapstick. The story was mainly about the girls, but Lenny and Squiggy made it around them more extensive, more bizarre, and more unpredictable. They represented the notion that in every neighborhood there are oddballs, and that those oddballs are very often the most genuine mirrors of real life. That was Garry's brilliance. The latter worked only if every rung was significant. In the absence of Lenny and Squiggy, Laverne and Shirley could have easily turned out to be just another sitcom revolving around two roommates trying to get love and pay the rent. But they were there, and the whole comic ecosystem was formed, dreamers, chaos makers, and everyone in between. Not just the actors, but even the creators grasped the concept. "We were the chaos that made their normal look sane," said Michael McKean. "We were the bottom of the ladder, but we loved being there." And Garry would not have it any other way. Little did anyone realize that simple formula would lead to one of the most iconic entrances in TV comedy history, and it started with two words nobody ever forgot: hello. The art of the entrance, some TV moments you can hear before you see, and for Laverne and Shirley, that moment was the creak of a door followed by one perfect word: hello. The audience would erupt every single time. It didn't matter what the plot was, how emotional the scene had been, or how serious the moment seemed. Once Lenny and Squiggy appeared, the energy shifted completely. That was the art of the entrance, and no one mastered it like David Lander and Michael McKean. From day one, Garry Marshall drilled into his cast that timing was everything. The pace of Laverne and Shirley was lightning fast. Every gag, every glance had to hit its mark. But with Lenny and Squiggy, it wasn't just timing, it was instinct. They didn't just walk in, they arrived. What began as a simple bit of stage direction became a running event, part ritual, part anticipation, crafted by two actors who understood exactly how to play a room. Penny Marshall later said, "The second that door creaked open, the audience already started laughing. They knew what was coming." That's how powerful their rhythm became. The door was a signal, laughter incoming. What made it remarkable was its simplicity. Lenny stood tall, goofy grin ready, while Squiggy barreled in with his jerky stride, shoulders forward, chin up, voice pitched somewhere between a sneer and a whine. Every gesture was intentional. Every half second of silence before they spoke built tension. Then, boom, hello. Instant explosion of laughter. Cindy Williams called it controlled chaos. She said they made that entrance look like an accident, but it was a science. They knew exactly how to walk in, how long to wait, when to pause, and when to speak. It was genius. That pause, barely a heartbeat, was everything. It gave the audience just enough time to brace for impact. The entrances were prepared through endless practice. The duo's timing was so synchronized that it seemed as if they were communicating through their minds. Just a pair of eyes, and they both knew the moment the other one would hit. The essentials of the physical choreography were planned to the minute: location of the actors, extent of their lean, duration of the stare, and breaking it. It was a kind of slapstick precision masquerading as spontaneity.